committee meeting. I'll just read out the protocol before we start. So I hope everybody signed in to the visitor book after our last fire incident. We want to make sure that everybody's here. There are no planned fire evacuation drills or alarms today. So if the fire alarm is activated, you must exit the building immediately. Council officers will direct you to the nearest fire exit and escort visitors to the building by the assembly point beside the silver man at the top of the Parliament wall. Building staff should report to the float assembly point, and you should remain at the assembly point until directed to reoccupy the building and the enter once the fire marshal is advised it's safe to do so. Please do not attempt to leave the site by vehicle unless clear to do so by the fire marshal. Please note this is a public meeting and that members of the public may be in attendance. The meeting will be recorded by the clerk and published online for public viewing. The taking of photographs, including screenshots, is not permitted during the meeting unless fully expressed permission from the convener. So, members online, can you virtually activate your cameras where possible to maybe to join by video and mute your microphones when not speaking, and do not come into items unless I invite you to do so. But if you do wish to speak, put the raise your hand button and people will be looking to see who's raising their hand about to bring you in. Okay, so today we'll hear each of the items set out the agenda. We'll invite the officer to present the paper and then we'll have the opportunity to ask questions before we proceed to debate this item. So is there any in the meeting this morning that would like to declare an interest? And with apologies to individual office members, and other than that, we've got a very good here this morning, which is great. Okay, so we'll move on first of all into the minutes of the last meeting. Page 1, first of all. Page 2. And page 3. We all have to accept those minutes as an accurate reference. So we'll move on to the first page of local government in Scotland overview 2023, and the purpose of this report is to provide Audit and Scrutiny Committee with an update on the current key issues facing local government in Scotland, as reported by the Accounts Commission in May 2023, so as to inform the adequacy of the scrutiny plans and activity over the coming year. And it's recommended that the committee no challenge and comment on the report. And for this, I'll hand over to Stuart Pittman. Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. The Chair said this report provides committee with an overview of some key challenges and recommendations from the Accounts Commission in the context of the operating environment of local government in Scotland. The full report is provided at Appendix 1 with the main points summarised in the paper. The report is provided to inform committee of the key areas it may wish to scrutinise over the coming year as it considers its risk profile and forward planning. The report sets out functions that experience significant funding increases and decreases and the impacts of such. It also usefully provides patterns of risk across Scotland. For example, as I chair the Risk and Integrity Forum on Monday, I shall be reflecting in the context of the risk register on the general issue raised on the impacts of insufficient scrutiny and governance failures, and I have no doubt that the committee will likewise wish to reflect on that as it looks to finalise its work plan. Beyond that, as I reflect on the register and the forward plan, it does appear that we have good organisational awareness, and many of the key risks and issues are being flagged and addressed through our risk and transformational planning routine. So, with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that any members of the committee may have.
Any questions? Mr. Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. Page 23 of our papers, which is page 9 of the report. I know that planning is the most impacted here. Is there any particular reason for that? In terms of the percentage change in expenditure in real terms over 10 years, planning is the one that's suffered the most. Is that, do you know the reason for that?
Sorry, that's fine, thanks, Councillor Quick. I mean, the report doesn't give that background level of information, so I mean, I could only, make some assumptions by that. But I guess in the report, I don't think the report intends to go into that level of detail. But to some extent, I think all of it has shown is that decisions on policy priorities, and I guess that's the whole budget process and that planning process is that decisions have to be made on priorities. And I think the theme of the report is that that the council will have to continue to make decisions on those priorities and be open and clear about those priorities. So, and for me, that direction of travel, whether it's roads, environmental services, and planning, culture, leisure, and central support services, that's been a trend over probably the last 10 years. And equally has been the trend towards kind of, the education and adult social care and looked after children as well. So some of that reflects the policy priorities. Perhaps some of it also reflects changing demographics and costs as well. So, for example, adult social care is well documented that we've got an ageing population, and therefore the costs of that have to go up, and then councils have to make decisions based around that. So probably quite a complex picture, but and that's my assessment of that. I don't think the report necessarily looks to draw those points out.
So basically, what you're saying is not that spending is going down; it's relative to these other spending. It's maybe the main static and spending and other things that's gone up because it's a percentage basis, not an absolute spending.
I would probably have to go and seek advice and a wee bit more analysis to answer that question. And the folks, I think what you're asking me is has spending gone down or up? I think what I say at the top of Exhibit 1 is percentage change in expenditure in real terms over 10 years. So I think it's more indicative in that context. But I think it would require further analysis for me to give you an honest and clear answer to that.
I just have to acknowledge that I'm not trying to flog this to death, but my concern is that planning can have a significant impact. Planning decisions have a significant impact on the environment and in which people live and in which people work. And it just would concern me that you're forgetting that, because I mean, planning is for the future, and building planning, that kind of thing. That's why I think people. Sorry, I'll move on from that. Page 45, mountains in the next one. Mentions participatory budgeting. Do we actually do that?
Sorry, Councillor, can I just flip open to the page there? Yes, participatory budgeting is a requirement through an agreement with COSLA. So every year we provide to COSLA assurance that we've met 1%. We have to demonstrate that we meet the 1% target. Budget is involved in participatory budgeting. We provide that because that provides internal reassurance to the Scottish Government and a collective basis for local government. From recollection, I think it is mentioned in the budget paper. Lindsay, could you perhaps just confirm that? I think there's normally a paragraph in the budget paper, or at least the budget strategy paper, that makes reference to the participatory budget and that confirming or otherwise that we made the required target.
So in the budget strategy paper each year, it confirms the council's commitment to working towards the 1% target for that. So I think in the past couple of years we've not quite met that target, but there are plans in place. So through some of our capital programme and other revenue projects, it's going out to communities to ask what they like and what they would like to see as part of the project. So that's how we're fulfilling that.
Okay, thanks. Just a community council meeting is that the other night they said they couldn't even pronounce it, didn't know what it was. So I just thought that was strange that we're going to communicate in particular with them. Is that a future plan to get out to these community councils and other bodies?
I think in terms of participatory budgeting, when we're going out to consultation, we don't call it participatory budgeting, it's more consultation and looking for feedback. So that's maybe why the term is not recognised as widely as we would want it to be, because it doesn't quite go over the tongue. As such, I don't know if Stuart wants to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, the terminology participatory budgeting is something that's probably a continuation of something that's been happening for a long period of time. So in terms of our budget, we do participatory budgeting because we are consulting with the community. I think a lot of the work that's happening around the family wellbeing partnership is very participatory budget focused, and that's probably going to take us along. I think the wellbeing hub, because of the level of expenditure on that, will probably mean that we'll go from perhaps just under the 1% to significantly over the 1%. So in some ways, there is a developing picture there. There's an organisation developing a direction to travel, and obviously through community empowerment, we want to do more of that. But when you've got particular projects, particularly something like the wellbeing hub, or some of the development work through the family wellbeing partnership, we will start to see significant changes in the levels of that participation. So I would suggest that is ongoing, it is developing, and actually we're making quite significant progress, but probably not using the word participatory budgeting in that way. I think we're adding a lot of it and actually doing it quite well also.
Brilliant, thanks for that. The next page, page 46, page 73. What was my question? Could be more board members, sorry, the board members arrange with the community council and trusts to organise public consultation and visiting. I'm saying again, sorry, I wrote this a few days ago. Let me just think what was coming to my mind about that. No, it's just asking if the board members could play a part in it. I thought we can see it. I don't think that's very relevant. Okay. Page 47. Page 47.84. Councils could still do more to empower communities. So I was just asking the questions, what do we currently do in this area of empowering communities? I know there's some stuff like asset transfer, things like that. Is there a broader approach to community empowerment?
I'll give it again the overview. Perhaps Lorraine, if you'd be good to maybe just elaborate on some of the more detail that I think family wellbeing partnership is particularly so obviously we have got the Community Empowerment Act, and there are particular legislative requirements around that. And so, at a very basic level, we do comply with that when we receive community asset transfers or participation requests, and we've got a number of ongoing discussions around that. So I think, we could certainly demonstrate that. I think the report talks quite a bit about being clear, open and transparent about the levels of challenge and also the policy priorities. And I think, again, if I obviously go back through successive budget processes, if I looked at Exhibit 3 and Perth and Kinross, I can equally just take Perth and Kinross out of that and put Clanmillisha Council on it, because we have every year done those kinds of consultations, including on our priorities, which again we've done in the past and just in the recent budget. There's quite a lot of other elements that are happening through things, through the lens, for example, also. So I'll maybe just hand over to Lorraine and maybe just elaborate a wee bit more on that. And just so there's some very high level stuff, but also stuff that's happening at a very service design level also, which is part and parcel of that. So Councillor Lorraine.
Thanks, Stuart. Councillor Coyne, Councillors. I think the Family Wellbeing Partnership at its core has got community voice, and that's the foundation that we've been trying to build as that work has emerged. So we've started with not just going straight out with a kind of consultation approach, which is the previous type of approaches, but it's really that co-design. And to do that, you need to build up the confidence of the community to work with you, and we've been doing that through Colombo. 1400 has them being part of the leadership development, so that they also have the skills to participate in that design process. So it's not just a straightforward what you want to see, and then us taking that back, and we might have to take some of that on board. It's very much actually really understanding what the community want from their services and want from the council, and that's what the work that we've been doing over the last 15 years. Stuart mentioned the lens, so we had 2 rounds of the lens, and that was very much getting the ideas from the community and us funding those. So it's another example of building up that kind of capacity and confidence and leadership. So the lens doesn't just end with the event itself, it continues to work with those groups within the community to develop the ideas forward. So all of that is part of the work that we're doing in the Family Wellbeing Partnership. It's probably worth saying, I know Stuart saying you could put P instead of PPC, you could have put Click Manager. So the work that we're doing in Click Manager is recognised UK-wide now, so we've been asked to join the UK network with the only authority in Scotland that's been asked to join that as part of the community voice work that we're doing in the Family Wellbeing Partnership. And within Scotland, we're part of a network we're working with funders to try and get the funders to understand more what our communities want as well. It's part of the work that we're doing with the Barter Foundation and the Hunter Foundation and other independent funders. So I think we've probably taken it much further than many other authorities, and that work is now being recognised internationally and in the UK. So we're the only authorities part of the Scotland-wide network who's working with the group of IFF, which being independent funders for them. So that's the work we're doing.
I have a couple more, but I can see the seat to Councillor Bennett, if anyone wants to answer the question.
So then,
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, one of the things I did want to ask, there is a lot of case studies here, which are fantastic. How closely are we actually aligning with all the other councils, and what is the negative aspect of it? It's about to be something that people would kick back and stuff. So how close are we getting to actually the thin line of actually speaking to everybody and actually doing stuff with it afterwards? That makes sense.
Right, sure. So if I'm understanding things in terms of the work that we're doing, how close are we getting to actually listening to what people actually tell us and then doing something about it, and then actually and in the whole picture. And I think it's this is complex and complicated work, and I think so to get that shift in what we're trying to do, we're probably not there yet in terms of making that as evident across all parts of our community. Do they recognise it's a bit like participatory budgeting? Do people recognise that we're doing that? We have the communication rights. I think we're probably pockets within it. We've got examples within, particularly within Alloa South and East, but not just isolated to Alloa South and East, where we can show the direct impact that that early work of building the capacity has then led to communities taking on additional things within the community, but we're standing side by side with them to support them. So some of the work in Hawk Hill, for example, I think has definitely come from the early work of the Family Wellbeing Partnership, the same around some of the Bowmar community work that we've actually started to take forward around groups of the community forming together and actually deciding what do they want to do. And our role then is to facilitate and support that and try and help them with funding. So I think I wouldn't say for a minute that we're anywhere near saying that that is complete 100%. I don't think it is anywhere in Scotland, to be honest, but I do think that we are at the forefront of actually making it happen.
Thanks, Chair. Any other questions?
It's just that one. It might be similar to what Councillor talked about in item 19, page 49, working with other councils. It's 49. Yeah, it says councils have made limited progress in this area in collaboration with other councils. Do we, how close do we work? Sorry, that's the chair. How closely do we work with other councils, and at what kind of level of engagement?
That's great. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work going on, you know, both at political levels, solace levels, and also director levels, and below that. I think what the reports can confirm is that, you know, that can be wholesale change, perhaps, which you know, has been you know, is really complex and tricky stuff. You know, we've had some level of experience in that in the past, and some of the difficulties that bring, not least through, you know, various complications with governance and support services. And I think you know, a lot of lessons have been learned for that. So yeah, there are ongoing discussions, and I think just at the back end of the last year, the management teams, Clan Management, Falkirk met, and you know, Nikki and the Chief Executive at Falkirk facilitated that, and we've had you know, engagement since how we look at elements. I'm also engaged with a 5 council discussion at West Lothian around particular areas, and I'm feeding back on behalf of the management team on some of those areas. It is quite challenging and complex work, and certainly the big things, you know, come with, you know, sometimes marginal rewards, but also sometimes a lot of risk, perhaps at times also bigger rewards. I think at the moment there's quite a lot of pragmatism also about just, you know, there's lots of, the report refers to workforce planning, gaps in workforce planning, you know, losing workforce at one end, struggling to bring them in at the other end. So there is quite a lot of work going on, looking at how we deal with the single points of failure that various councils are experiencing. I pick up in here that you know, there have been a number of areas where we've struggled to recruit for a number of years, but we're also starting to see other areas emerging, legal, accountancy, a lot of the kind of central professional services are struggling across the group as well. So we're increasingly looking at how we can share those posts. And also there's been the work through the continuing discussions through the REC. So there is a lot of discussions going on. I think what the report is referring to is that it possibly needs a big radical step change, but that does come with a lot of risks and a lot of complications as well. So yeah, there's a lot of discussions going on at various levels. And a lot of work happening, and also things that are happening now. So, for example, the trading standing service has been shared for many years, and the internal audit service and other things. You know, within that territory, and there's other areas that we're you know, actively exploring as well. So, lots of stuff happening around that area. But you know, the big prizes are not short term, none of the medium term. They take a lot of working through knowledge and diligence.
Thanks, Stuart. The question is really coming from this, the idea that we'll get a variety of case studies together this report coming from councils all over Scotland, each of them in the report purporting to have solved or attempted to solve the problem. And I just wondered if you were actively researching those particular solutions, because they've been highlighted in here. So you should be talking to councils all over Scotland, where there's an area perhaps that they've solved the problem that you're in the middle of trying to solve. It's a good active level of collaboration we're talking about.
Ready? Just to add to some of what Stuart was saying, I think, yes, I think we are actively engaged with in a number of areas across the piece to find out, you know, what other authorities. So we're we're working very closely with Dundee and Angus, and in terms of trying to understand some of the shared activity that's going on there, and whether any of that can apply to some of the work in Lancashire. We're hosting just next week 25 people coming to the Beaumar Centre from across Scotland, which is about place-based learning and actually trying to understand from others, Glasgow, Dundee, East Ayrshire, to name but a few, coming together to actually see what they're doing, what can we learn from what they're doing. So I think there's a lot of that going on. The other area I think is worth highlighting is the Regional Improvement Collaborative, which I lead at the moment currently for both our and Lothian, and we are pooling resources as well as pooling knowledge. And I think it's not just about sharing services, it's about understanding what's working in those areas and what can we learn from some of those. So there's the Regional Improvement Collaborative work. There's 6 RICs across Scotland, and we are part of that grouping that I just mentioned. And there's a lot, not just to be learned from our own area, but learning from the other 5 across Scotland. So I think that's just part of what we do on a regular basis is work, whether it's with the improvement service or the RICs or within whatever structure. But I think we have to learn from others, and we have to actually try and apply who we do that fits with our own context.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. The first one was just based on one of the answers there in terms of the ability to recruit staff, and particularly thinking about the area of accountancy. And I was thinking about modern apprenticeships and how much we utilise them. I know there are a lot of schemes at the moment with universities where if you take on a modern apprentice, they'll support them to gain a degree alongside their modern apprenticeship. And I was thinking, when there's a real gap in recruitment in all areas, really, I was thinking accountancy because I'm aware of that, but in all areas, very much we're looking to, because that fits with the development of young people focused as well. So I was just wondering how much we do with that.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So, yeah, we've been doing quite a lot of work on the workforce plan. I think it's not too far away from coming to council with the interim one, but also at a portfolio level, we've also been delving into some of these issues. So we're definitely looking at some of those, trying to be as creative as we can. So I'm not so sure that the professional side of things, in accountancy and legal, we've got modern apprentices as such, but we are looking at things in terms of how we develop our legals, the becoming accountants, looking at pathways through that, looking at perhaps taking on trainees and then enabling them to become qualified with us. So there is quite a lot of thought going around that, because I think that's part and parcel of the future. But I wonder, Chris, would you mind maybe just coming in and giving a bit of an overview of some of the wider initiatives that I missed there?
Yeah, no, I think you're covered most of that. We are working hard with our portfolios in terms of developing direction plans. One of the things I think with the future is modern apprentices, but graduate apprentices as well. Traditionally, we've used the craft modern apprentices. Sorry. So yeah, we've been working hard with our portfolios to develop the workforce plans, and part of that is future workforce and looking at modern apprentices, but graduate apprentice placements. We are experiencing difficulties like any council across Scotland, but in another professional university. So traditionally we've used modern apprentices in our craft areas, and we already had council agreed a change to ensure that it's background for modern apprentices was a real living wage, and that came into effect last year. So those plans will come up to council shortly. So there's a lot of initiatives going in there, and we're also looking at flexibility in terms of flexible working, etc., to attract people and make the council a more attractive place to work. And we're bringing hopefully people up to council to make flexible working day or night as well. So we've got a lot of initiatives across the league to increase our attractiveness and increase recruitment into the council and retain our staff at the council. So.
Thank you very much. Can I ask another question? Sorry, it's a slightly different topic. Throughout this document, it was mentioned in the third sector, and you notice I point out labour quite a lot. A lot of the third sector lost their core funding from councils in recent years, and what this paper really specifies is that the third sector can generate and bring in a lot of funding. So, for example, if there's a need identified for the work that's going on, it's been recognised that often that work can be done by the third sector rather than the council. But the third sector sort of labour in the service survive because a lot of them lost core funding. Are there any plans in the future? I know there's been great work done with Aberlour, for example, and certainly through Strive. But I was wondering if there was any way of revisiting that in the future to see, really strengthening the third sector to really be a key partner, because they can bring in masses of money from other areas. So, they've got that ability to do that with local authorities don't. So, I can see everyone desperate to come out there. So,
Absolutely right. I mean, part of the future is about us collaborating with third sector and with others. I mentioned independent funders previously, but also how we can access things like Robertson Trust, and traditionally they will not fund local authority projects, because at the end of the day they would expect council to be funding such projects. But I think there's an increasing recognition across Scotland and across the UK, as I keep mentioning, that partnership is not just about where does the funding come from, but it's also using the expertise of the third sector to really understand what the need is, because they're much closer to the communities than we are often. And instead of us being the provider of services, I think the third sector can often do that far better than our role will start to change as we go forward in the landscape and public sector, as part of the public sector reform piece. So in Clint Manager, I think we are pretty far down the line in thinking how do we do that, because we recognise the strength that's there, and we also have worked with that funding sector to realise that there is a real opportunity. We've managed to bring in quite a bit through the family wellbeing partnership already, and that money has been going out to the third sector rather than it supplementing the work of council officers. But we would like to extend that even further, and we've started to explore what would that kind of entity be if there was a funding source that was directly linked with the third sector, and the council was only a partner in that process. What could that look like? So we're exploring that at the moment, and that's mentioned in the papers that came to council last week, or 2 weeks ago now, I think, 10th of August. In terms of it's an action that we're taking forward as part of the Family Wellbeing Partnership. So I fully agree with that's the direction of travel, but we need to think very carefully, because the funding, there's two ways of some of the third sector getting funding. So there's the core funding, but increasingly, and that's part of the area that's touched on previously, there's ring-fenced funding, which can only be used for example, we have money to support in intervention and family support. So that money cannot be used in any other way by the council. It can be only used for that area. So we've worked with the third sector to think that's additional funding. It might not be core funding, but it's additional funding. That's the whole Family Wellbeing Fund. How do we get that into the third sector? So looking at consortiums of third sector organisations, Gillian Scott, who's here today, has been leading some of that work with the third sector. So I think there's a lot of, that's the direction of travel, and I think it will increase as we go forward.
Thank you. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. Can I ask somebody to move the paper, please? Oh, sorry. Can I ask somebody to move the paper, please?
I'm happy to move that. If you don't mind, just listening to the question there, I've got so much that I could probably say about what's going on in Cumberlandshire. This report is quite interesting because it's about local government in general across the whole of Scotland and 32 local authorities. And I would say that Ulster Council Commissioner probably comes from coming to Cumberlandshire about some of the work that we're doing, because we are so far ahead in so many areas and key recommendations, that it's actually quite disappointing. And I think in reflection, it's probably because we don't shout enough about the work that we're doing, and probably because we're small. We can see the impacts in Cumberlandshire that you would see in Glasgow, which is 10 times her size. So I find that a little bit frustrating. So what's in the paper, I just really wanted to pick up on a few issues. We were talking about finances and resources. We can't bury our heads in the sand. We're now at 15 years of austerity where public spending has been shrinking, and that's going to continue. There's no way that that's going to change, and that then impacts on the money that councils have to spend. And we do have to have the open and honest conversations with our communities, and I think we're trying to have that. But sometimes politics get in the way because tough decisions have to be made. But people don't want to be making those decisions. But I think in recent years, certainly, we've went a long way in Cumberlandshire to kind of move that on a bit, and we're having real discussions as politicians about the situations that we're facing and the tough decisions that we have to take. So that work was on. It was on all across the year, but very much so at budget time. And when I look at when the Councillor Coyne was talking there about planning, the spend on planning has reduced. The spend on every service apart from education and health and social care has reduced, because that's our priorities. That's where the government's around fencing the money, and that's where we're getting additional funding. So when we're asked to make budget decisions, we can only cut back in areas that are not ring-fenced. So that's going to be the non-statutory areas, and it does impact on services and it does impact on communities. And we need to be honest about that. There's no point saying it doesn't. However, the areas that we are making a lot of inroads in, and we've agreed them as our shared priorities, is tackling poverty. It's about raising attainment, it's about the promise. So that's where we're investing more and more of our money, and that's where we're making the real differences, because these are the sections of the community that really need that investment. And I don't make any apologies for that, but we do have the honest conversation. Other areas that have been cut back in years. And we've got a non-members budget briefing later on this afternoon, and the figures on there are going to be start for the year ahead. So there's going to have to be more honest and frank conversations in this chamber and with their communities out there. When we look at collaboration, this is an area that the manager is punching way above its weight on. The Chief Executive, Nikki, has been leading a group of Chief Executives from, I think it's 6 other councils, and work with them in the service about collaboration. What is it that we're all doing? What can we share? Where are areas that we could make improvements on? And there's papers that come back and forward to causal leaders about that. I'm obviously sitting causal leaders on behalf of this council. Causal leaders is another area where we, we collaborate with the other territorial local authorities. We share ideas and views and thoughts. They're not always the same, and they don't always come with positive outcomes, but the discussions are particularly good there. Myself and the Chief Executive have been working really hard with Stirling and Falkirk councils about building our Forth Valley Regional Economic Partnership. That's the sort of work that's going to make big changes in the future. And Lorraine kind of mentioned there around about the work with Rick. That's making, I think, huge inroads in what manager and really supporting our work on the attainment kind of agenda. So there is a lot of work going on there. And again, I'm wondering why everybody doesn't know this. Because it's there, it comes in council papers, it's maybe we're not joining up the picture well enough there. When I look at another priority, their leadership, and it's talking about kind of investing time and thinking radically about the future. Last August, this council passed the paper on the target operating model. That's going to change how we do business in this council, and that's radical. And I think we took a lot of time thinking about that. So there's just so much work going on there. And I think we're leading the way. The Family Wellbeing Partnership is at the vanguard of work. Both UK and Scottish governments are looking at this work and thinking, look at what they're doing there. We're attracting a lot of external funding because of that work. And Lorraine has been leading on that quite fantastically. And the differences that we're starting to make and build up capacity within our communities, the third sector. That then goes on to collaboration, not just with other local authorities, but with the third sector and with our communities and delivering things. So this is just an area that I think club managers should be shouting more about. The picture kind of laid out by Audit Scotland, it's always going to be kind of quite bleak when things are looking, tough. But that's the same with the local authorities across the whole public sector. Here in club managers, we're doing so much good work. And we're leading the way on things that's been laid out in this report. So I'm quite happy to propose it, and I'm quite happy to shout about where club management is doing particularly well. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Forson. Can I have somebody to second the paper, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Absolutely agree with everything that Ellen says there. I mean, it's about time. It's about time that this weekend was shown religion. And so I said, we're here to call ourselves a week country. I said before, it's a week country, the thing is hard. I mean, we do have a lot out there that we do need to show them. And it's disappointing to me that there are no members of the press. But perhaps we need to look at the contract and push this a bit more and say, well, this is what we're actually doing. If we can rely on the press to come on, just live for a short. Let's look at it, and absolutely, let's share it with it. because we don't show it, but no one else is. I'll be second this paper.
Thanks, Councillor Hale. Now we have the opportunities to debate. And you want to speak on them?
Yeah,
Yep. Councillor Hale.
I think the whole point of the debate is to try and eke out what is in everybody's mind about how it's working. I know it's working, I can see it working, I can see it improving. And as Lorraine said, we're not there yet, and we still need to keep a grip on it so that when we come in to a meeting like this, we can discuss it and keep it live. So if we don't do that, then it's like, so we need to make sure that everything is going in the right direction. And I mean, I'm amazed at what's happened in the last couple of years, and I've been privileged to be part of that. But we need to keep it going. We need, and to keep it going, we need to keep it at the front of our minds, and to keep it at the front of our minds is what we do here. So I'm very pleased with what's happening. But as Lorraine says, we're not here yet. We're not there yet. We're here, but we're not there yet. And long may it continue. As long as it's going in the right direction, I'm perfectly happy with everything. Thank you.
Councillor Benny, so are we all happy to look at the paper? Move on to item 5. So this paper provides an update of the financial performance for the council as at 31st of March 2023 in respect of the general fund, revenue and capital spend, and the achievement of savings for the current financial year 2022-23, the Kilmarnock element of the Sunline Kilmarnock Social Care Partnership revenue spend, and the housing revenue account revenue and capital spend for the financial year 2022-23. And we're asked to note the report, commenting and challenging as appropriate on a number of matters. So can I hand over to Lindsay Finn to present this report?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. So, as the Chair has pointed out, this is the draft financial outturn for the financial year 22-23. Members are asked to note that these figures are drafted following completion of the audit process. The general fund revenue is reporting an underspend of 5.335 million for the year. This is a significant reduction compared to the forecasted underspend, significant increase compared to the forecasted underspend of 1.292 million reported as of December. The main reason for the movement is the earmarking of underspends of 4.431 million, which are not known until the end of the year. Appendix 11 details the earmarked funds from in-year underspends. After earmarking, this underspend results in a contribution of 904,000 to uncommitted reserves. A summary of the outturn position across directorates is provided in Appendix 1, and that includes earmarked funds for each directorate area. And in full detailed spend by service is also provided in Appendices 3 to 6 with explanations of variances and movements. The Kilmarnock element of the Health and Social Care Partnership is outturning an underspend for the year of 923,000. 572,000 of this has been used to offset overspends elsewhere within the partnership, and the remaining 351,000 has been added to the IGB reserves for use in future years. The General Fund Capital Programme is outturning an underspend of 10.7 million across various projects against a revised budget of 20.6 million. A summary of the forecast per asset class provided in 6.3 of the report, and details by project is provided in Appendix 10. The housing revenue account is forecasting is outturning a surplus of 6.99 million, which is 1.4 million above the budgeted surplus. The HRA capital programme is reporting an underspend of 4.8 million. Details of the HRA revenue and capital outturns are provided in Appendix 8 and 9. In relation to savings, the council has achieved 88% of the improved 1.838 million savings. The remaining 234,000 will be carried forward to 23-24. Details of individual savings are included in Appendix 2. So I'm happy to take any questions on the paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor, I'll let Councillor Campbell talk for this.
Just a quick question, could you, in appendix 11, page 86, can you just tell a little bit more about what is other miscellaneous commitments? So was that 1.2 million, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you.
So there's a number of smaller commitments within each of the service areas of retail to hands. But these are things like where there's underspends on specific projects that maybe be delayed in the year, or if there have been reference funding that's sort of lesser amount in itself than some of the bigger items, sometimes reports something over 300,000 or 400,000, and then anything smaller than that is in the miscellaneous. So I don't have that detail, but I can provide it if you want.
Thank you very much. That's the point.
Well, it's a variation of my question. I think we've been is the past extension. Is there not a minimum, but an maximus figure in what goes into this awareness? Or do you have to declare figures about a certain point and get that separate?
There's no threshold for reporting. That's just something that we determine ourselves. So if it's over about 300,000 or 400,000, I tend to report it unless it's something specific that committee or accounting might want to be aware of, if it's within against funds. So but there are some things there. So the against housing grants 143,000, so that's reported, although it's not in miscellaneous because it's a specific housing grant, so it's showing that that's something specific that we've got to keep separate. The same with development contributions of 38. Again, it's a smaller amount, but it's something that the council committee should be aware of, that we're holding this money. So there's no sort of fixed criteria as to what should be reported or shouldn't, but it tends to be those that have specific ring-fence functions that are reported separately.
It's a myriad of small items in this. Okay, what we talk about page 83. Yeah, page 83. Yes, conversation about this during the meeting a couple of weeks ago, but I'm provided that slide question. Sorry, page 85. Things at the bottom there. There's a column with over underspend, and there's a column beside it proposed to carry forward. So completely understand the carry forward about the company. And from an accounting point of view, what is the fate of the items that don't make it into the carry forward? Are they, is that the end of the road? When you declare an overspend or underspend in column, third of those columns, is that a gain or a loss to the revenue view? Is that the indicate that project is finished and that's the end result financially? But I don't think that would be the case, because I'm sure I saw something which I knew was going to occur in another year. So maybe the 5.46 million that's not in the carry forward, is it perhaps in the carry forwards to future years? Because it's not clear whether the over underspend is a final statement or an on the journey statement. I think that's what we use to clarify. Another column then, which is everything else that's carried forward. So in other words, we're then left with a view of the actual performance underspend for the projects. Do you follow what I'm trying to say?
I think that the complication here is that a number of projects are not in the projects and they cross years. So what you're seeing in front of you is the budget for that project for the financial year included, and there may be a budget in a future year already approved as part of the capital programme for the same project. So you're seeing the under or overspend on the element that was allocated to that financial year only. And in some cases, where there is a budget for the carry on of that project in the next year, we will need to carry forward. So we're not saying that that is the final cost of each of those projects. It's the working position as at the 31st of March. So some will be carried forward because the project is delayed, and that will be bulk of the carry forwards that are noted here. And that either adds to any budget that we've approved next year, or it's if we haven't had an additional budget approved, it just, work will just continue on to the next year based on the cash of the budget.
You see the confusion, someone's trying to look at one of those lines and decide that that's a good project and a bad project. You perhaps be mistaken to judge the result of that question or the information here, because you don't know that that's not the end point. So, you know, looking at any something line that's not correct, for example, conversion improvements. 175,000 budgeted, 51,000 spent. Is that 123,653 written off expenses in the sense that they didn't need to be done, they were budgeted for, they didn't need to be done, that's returned to the general fund? Or is that going to appear in the fifth column that's not there? It's going to be there for future years, just to take that as an example. It's hard, if you scrutinise the efficiency of projects, the information we've got here, the whole story isn't there.
What we've tried to do within the body of the report at 6.3 is draw out for each of the areas what is our under local trends and what's been carried forward. It doesn't completely answer your question, I appreciate that. It's just difficult to put them in. So if you budgeted for it in the next year, but we can have a look at it and see if there's anything we can do to improve the presentation.
That would be appreciated. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah. Can I ask for somebody to move the paper then, please? Move the paper, did you say?
Sorry, I said I would formally.
All right, just one minute. Second. Okay, thank you. And we'll move on to item 6. Oh, sorry. Sorry. I will eventually get on the list. Does anyone want to debate the paper? Be happy to vote. Excellent. We'll move on to item 6. So it is a requirement of contract standing orders that exceptions should be reported to the next available audit committee. The purpose of this paper, therefore, is to provide detail on exceptions to contract standing orders submitted in the previous quarter. The committee is asked to note the report, commenting and challenging as appropriate. And that is Stuart again.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this is a standard report with 2 exceptions. Having been agreed since the last meeting, both are outlined in the report, and I'd be happy to respond to any questions that members may have.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? Somebody to move the paper. Okay, in 2 seconds. Thank you. Anybody to debate the paper? Very much. We'll move on to the next item. Item 7, so updating the outstanding internal audit actions. So the purpose of this report is to provide Audit and Scrutiny Committee a progress update on outstanding actions arising from internal audit reports. Appendix 1 provides a summary update of the progress with key points highlighted in the consideration section of this report. So the committee is asked to note, comment and challenge the report and note the progress on outstanding internal audit action will be provided henceforth on a 6-monthly basis. Okay, and I think for this one we have Stuart McMahon and Isabel Wright.
Thank you, Chair. And they investigate the number of backlogs and the progressing and reporting on internal audit actions. This report is a combination of concerted effort from the committee up to date with progress on those backlogs and work being done to ensure the recovery of that position as quickly as we possibly can. As members will see, most outstanding actions are completed or are now well advanced. Some are less so, and these are set out in Appendix 1 with comments on when they will be completed. This, of course, is a moving picture. Since the report was written, more actions have been completed. So, for example, I know that the Legionella actions has the final action on the Legionella report has now been completed. That's completed earlier this week, so that is now fully complete. But equally, there are also a ongoing programme of internal audit reports. So as you will see further on the agenda, there are more actions as a result of the reports that are coming through. But I also know that work is also ongoing to ensure that some of those actions are being improvement actions that we put in place on an ongoing basis. So as the Chair alluded to, there will be 6 monthly reports going forward where we will provide updates on any progress reports on all internal audit reports and the actions that have been through the committee in terms of those reports, but also any outstanding issues, just to make sure that the committee's got a full overview of all internal audit reports, the progress being made, and then obviously make some judgments and assessment on the wider control environment. So at that, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions on the paper. I also have a number of colleagues with me today that should be able to help me explain if necessary.
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking at particularly the kind of areas around kind of sundry debtors, but I know that we've said all throughout the paper, kind of due to the pandemic, etc. That's why those things are, I suppose, so late or things haven't been completed. At what point will we kind of, I suppose, stop saying the pandemic's been, the kind of cause for, the kind of delays and things, and whether it then become, another reason for delay. Because there's some things, I suppose, that are outstanding since kind of October 2017, and we're prioritising the things that are older and delayed, to make sure that they're brought up, because they were clearly put on the risk register, or there for a reason. And if something's kind of outstanding for even 5-6 years, you start to get a bit, well, I'm a bit concerned there. So just wondering.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Portion. I think to some extent, in essence, I brought this paper forward and I've been keen to bring it forward as quickly as I can to kind of draw a line under that and to make sure that we get to that position. There are backlogs, there is no doubt about it. And if I took sundry debts, for example, there was a lot of abstractions for good reason. I also take the point that a number of those actions were in place before that. When I reflect and look back on the pandemic, I think in terms of the journey that we've been on as an organisation, there was quite a substantial restructure that was done in about 2019. I know for my part, the management team at Partnership Performance reduced from about 9 managers to 4 managers over that period. That piece of work was completed in November 2019, and then the pandemic struck. So I think it has been, probably not all attributable to the pandemic. I think it was particularly looking at that single debtors one, there was an element of where revenue sat in one service and transferred to another service, and there's been a bit of a gap there. So I'm fully acknowledging and trying to be as transparent as we can on that one, and also give assurance that we are working valuable in the background to get us to that line and make sure that this committee has got absolute assurance, and also an internal audit have got absolute assurance that when they put reports forward and when they are accepted by this committee, that we are making sure that things are actually as quickly as we possibly can to ensure that we've got a tight control environment. Because if I just go back to reflect on some of the issues that were flagged up in the previous report, a couple of reports back, it is flagging up, but that's a general issue across Scotland. I think change, organisational change, and also the scale and pace of turnover and senior managers is definitely having an impact on that. So I do want to acknowledge that, but also very acknowledge that we're not making any, we do, I fully accept that the pandemic has to be a history, and I would hope this report and this moving forward, as I said, there's been a lot of effort being put into to trying to recover that position. I think in 6 months' time, I think we'll see significant progress on that as well. Hopefully you'll start to see that and we can stop talking about the pandemic. I think we're also talking about the pandemic, but hopefully also committee can see that we're trying to be open and transparent and give you that position and, take on the chin any points that the committee feels that it needs to bring to their attention.
Just want to confirm.
That's somebody to get the paper, please. Councillor Bennett, thank you. Second. Councillor Gordon, thank you. Would anybody like to get the paper? Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, I mean, I also think what she was saying there about we'll have to. Not much feel, it's not much long saying, so we've got to stop using COVID as an excuse. I mean, we're talking about public perceptions here as well. And if we look at what we say, it's COVID, God is going to take any services. I'm looking at the report here. I've never seen so many red marks on the report. And that is a really disappointing scenario to find yourself in. You need to get this from red down to yellow as quickly as they possibly can. And I'm glad to hear you saying there this morning that the Legionella one has certainly been dealt with. And I'm ready to say thanks Sean on that for the work that she's done on that job. But we need to get this done. We really need to. It's imperative that we stick with this, have this in mind and get into the best way that we can get it as quickly as possibly can, as effectively as we can. It's not an easy job. It won't be an easy job. With COVID hit, and if you rightly say with the rearrangements and the working practices, that's a tremendous effect. But we need to move on from that. We talked earlier on about how we move the council on. This is part of it. We are a part of that. That project, and that, sorry, a little part of that process. So we need to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paulson.
Yeah, just kind of come in and suppose to have a wee bit of debate there. I think it's important to recognise that this report is an internal audit report, so this isn't affecting public services. The public won't be aware that a lot of this work's going on. It's targets and challenges that we've set ourselves to kind of, address areas of risk, etc., that we feel really need to be addressed. And I'm quite sure by Stuart saying that in 6 months' time we'll see a very different picture. The pressure's going to be on now, Stuart, because in 6 months' time, if we've not moved that on, we'll be asking why. But I think it's understandable, and I fully accept the reasons that have been given that we're kind of behind in this work, because we did divert resources onto the public-facing work to ensure that our communities out there they got their COVID grants, the businesses got their COVID grants, and you can't argue with that because that's exactly what we had to do. We've moved on from that now, and there's going to be a time of catching up. I think there's a lot of effort going into kind of make that catch up happen. So 6 months' time, we're looking for ambers and greens there. Thanks.
Yes, please come in. Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to underline some of what Councillor Fortune said, I think the excuses are behind this. This is a red line moment. I think everything now is prospective, not legislative. I want to like particularly with this report in the latest notes column. You actually do say in there what is going to happen next. I've noticed in other reports that when you read the latest notes, they're kind of telling you how we got here. It's not telling you where we're going and what we're going to do about it next. And that's the important part. We can't change the past, but we can change the future. So the future is what should be in that second last column. And in most of this it is. So I applaud that. I would certainly support the report.
Thank you. Anybody else? We're happy to know the report. Okay. Moving on to item 8, draft of Audit and Scrutiny Committee Forward Plan 2023-24. So the purpose of this report is to develop a forward plan for Audit and Scrutiny Committee and to introduce the concept of an annual evaluation report. So it's recommended that the committee note the draft forward plan set out in Appendix 1, note its intent to convene an informal meeting of the committee members to review the forward plan prior to the final draft being considered by the committee in October 2023, and note the approach to the development of a committee annual report based on the indicative self-evaluation approach outlined in Appendix 2 and you events here.
Thank you, Chair. And hope to some extent this report that really does signal essentially moving on to avoid the control environment and the work the scrutiny role that this committee has. So this report provides committee with a draft forward plan for consideration, Appendix 1. Appendix 2 also provides a draft annual evaluation approach based on what is known as SITFA Audit Committee position statement. I think in essence it's good practice for the work of this committee to review its membership, how it's operating, and whether it's getting the right levels of reports from officers that are experienced across the whole control environment, and indeed whether officers and members of the committee room for improvement, but also things, for example, for member development and training, briefings, etc. Or perhaps even, as is suggested in the appendix to bring in subject matter experts to help with certain elements of scrutiny. So rather than bring forward the forward plan as I have done at this stage every year for the year ahead, in discussion with the Chair and Vice Chair, brought forward a draft forward plan today to allow committee time to away from an informal environment to both look at the agenda and also as part of that do, in parallel with that, do the self-evaluation which is set out in Appendix 2, just to in essence come forward with an improvement plan, but also to give a sense and to give committee the time to make sure that the breadth and the scope of the reports that will be coming before the committee over the coming year do reflect the issues that are of concern to the committee, but also provide assurance against the wider control environment. So again, I know it's a slight change to what we've done in the past. Hopefully it will be welcomed by committee. The work in Appendix 2, I actually think it's probably not a huge piece of work in terms of perhaps a couple of hours, but I think it will be time well spent for the committee in terms of looking at developing its role over the coming year, which I hope to do with this support. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And now we're open to questions. Any questions to Stuart?
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe within the, I suppose, business plan, separate business plans and things, but obviously we've agreed as a council, a significant programme of transformation. And that includes search transformation, financial transformation, there's so much in it. And I'm just wondering whether we need something, kind of separate on the committee to really focus down, some scrutiny on progress against transformation as something separate, or whether it's kind of included in all the business plans. It's just something I've been thinking about since we had that meeting earlier in the year, because if we don't keep up the momentum on the transformation that we've, kind of agreed to do, we're going to start to kind of falter. So just wondering where that all kind of comes in.
So yeah, I have been reflecting on this one myself, Councillor Fortune. In essence, it should come through in business planning, it come through separately on business planning, and Blaine has the people one later on this agenda, and I'm sure that is certainly is reflected in there. But there is possibly something that we need to do to be the future and actually focus on being the future in some of the key transformational projects, and perhaps bring that through. Ties back also in Councillor Collins' earlier points in the capital programme, because quite a number of these are around the capital programme, showing efficiency and progress against some of the major projects. So I think that is an area that we probably I'm certainly would add value to the forward plan.
Somebody to move the paper, please. I'm happy to move. Mr. Wilson, Councillor Lewis, seconds. And now we're open to debate. Would anyone like to debate the paper? Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, I'm just going to say a few words actually. When you look at the forward plan here, I just think that really highlights the great work that's going on across the council, across all the services. A lot of these plans were kind of come to council for approval, but it's just really important that, you know, as an organisation that we ask the questions about progress against the business plans and against, you know, kind of everything else that we're setting out. So good to see the paper coming forward, and I think everybody's going to be really seeing where the next week. Thanks.
Thank you. And I just add one point to the debate in terms of Councillor Coyle and myself have had quite a few discussions with Stuart about this, and we felt that we'd also had a meeting with the external auditors and the internal auditors, and we felt that a separate meeting away from audit and scrutiny really to really go through this and sort of deep dive into the elements that we're going to cover, and also a kind of like mini skills audit as well to see where we're all at and what the external experts we need to maybe bring in at different stages. So we've had some discussion. This is why it's a draft at the moment, because there may be other things that do influence what you're saying in terms of the transformation side. I've noticed the kind of gap in that as well. And I think although we'll come up with business plan reports, there's no harm in this actually really focusing in on that. So there's other elements I think that we might want to bring in as we move forward as a committee. So I'm a bit tense about a whole plan set in place for the next wee while when we don't know what's going to happen. So I think, you know, those discussions will be really helpful. We will meet our requirements of external audit as well as a committee to take things forward. And it's really key that one of the messages I got loud and clear from the external auditor is that we're working together as a group. We're not here with our own agendas, and that we need to really work forward for the benefit of the council. And I think that's where we've got the opportunity here within scrutiny and council meetings to do that. So hopefully it'll be a positive step. Okay, so you're all happy to move on this paper? Or accept this paper or whatever. I'm getting to that tired stage of the day. I can't remember what I'm doing. So we'll move on to item 9, internal audit annual assurance report 2022-23. And this report provides the overall assurance on the council's arrangements for risk management, governance and control based on internal audit work undertaken during 2020-23. And there are a number of aspects. I'm not going through them all that the council has to note. So I will hand over for this on to Isabel Wright. Thank you, Isabel.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, this is the 22-23 Internal Audit Annual Assurance Report. The purpose of the report is to summarise the work internal audit have undertaken over the course of the last year and provides that overall opinion, as you've just mentioned, which is on the Council's arrangements for risk management, governance and control based on the work that's been undertaken. The report also comments on compliance with the public sector internal audit standards. As you can see from section 2, I asked the Audit and Scrutiny Committee to note that sufficient internal audit work was undertaken to support a balanced assurance, and that internal audit can provide a substantial assurance on the Audit and Scrutiny Committee's arrangements for risk management, governance and control for the year to 31st of March 23. Paragraph 3.4 explains that the internal audit plan for 22-23 proposed 16 assignments. This included 10 audit reports specifically relating to Clackmannanshire Council. Paragraphs 3.6 to 3.9 provide some detail relating to each of the 10 audits, with paragraphs 3.10 and 3.11 focusing specifically on the 6 audit reports that have been finalised. I'd ask members to note, of the 6 audit reports that have been finalised, 2 were substantial assurance and 4 were limited assurance. A summary of the assurance levels is set out at Appendix 1. Internal audit have made a total of 81 recommendations in relation to these 6 finalised audit reports. Appendix 2 summarises the action taken for all 16 assignments, with the more detail reported at Appendix 3. Paragraphs 3.13 and 3.14 indicate that although sufficient work was undertaken to support the balanced opinion on the overall adequacy of the Council's control environment, Given the number of the recommendations and the number of reports where the level of assurance has fallen below a substantial assurance, it's imperative that remedial action is taken on these recommendations as a matter of priority. The Strategic Director of Partnership and Performance will therefore provide any status changes to the Audit and Scrutiny Committee as part of a 6-monthly update report. Internal Audit will also provide assurance and follow-up. This ensures that any recommendations that remain outstanding beyond the agreed implementation date will be included in future update reports to the Audit and Scrutiny Committee. Basically, we just more or less discussed that a couple of papers ago. Should the trend away from substantial assurance within audit reports continue, there's a risk that in future years I may not be able to reach an overall conclusion that substantial assurance can be provided in relation to the arrangements for risk management, governance and control, as stated at paragraph 315. Paragraph 316 highlights the internal audit performance against key performance indicators and explains at 317 that actual performance met or exceeded target for all 3 indicators. Performance has dropped, however, in one of the indicators. In overall terms, the programme of work was completed within the agreed time allocation. Paragraph 318 sets out the reasons for the delays in issuing audit findings, with agreement from the senior leadership group to monitor and ensure improvement. Section 4 of the report comments on our compliance with public sector internal audit standards. These set out the principles and practices that we must comply with, and every year we're required to undertake a self-assessment against those standards. This gives reassurance that we operate in line with the standards. It was undertaken by internal audit during March of this year. There's also a 5-year external assessment, which the section last underwent during 2018, and we were found to be compliant then. The 2023 external assessment has commenced now. I have Sarah here with me today. Sarah is the senior internal auditor in the team and was involved in undertaking the audits that are in your appendices. So both Sarah and I are happy to try and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'll kick off with this. In building security, this is something we've been talking about, as it says in the report, since 2018. And in 2020, internal audit issued a further report. It looks from this, I could be totally wrong as if the work's completed, but obviously this is something I'm really concerned about because of the safety of the children and young people. And the fact that it's only limited assurance, I wondered what's going to move forward really. Is there going to be more audit work, internal audit work done on this, or is that it completed? Thank you.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're right. We've done the building security audits over a number of years, and it's about keeping it prominent in people's minds. Sometimes what happens is it can be tailgating into different offices, and it's just making sure that people are always aware of who's maybe behind them, and to challenge people if they don't recognise them, if they're not wearing their pass, making sure people are escorted. It seems quite straightforward, but on a day-to-day basis, depending on what's happening in that office or area, you know, it can be forgotten. So we would be anticipating continuing this and slotting it into future years' programmes. You'll see on there's a list of, on page, I think it's 132 of the pack, you'll see the kind of problems that we were finding. So if that had been more improved, it's maybe something that we wouldn't consider as quickly, but it's definitely going to be staying on the internal audit radar for that very reason.
Yeah, just to add, and I think this paper did come up separately earlier in the year, and I know all that work and the issues that were raised around the schools were looked into, the registered centre, etc. And you know, this is an ongoing piece of work that you can never really take your eye off the ball. And I think it is right that internal audit do continue to keep an eye on this until we get to the place that we're seeing that substantial assurance coming through. I think the point I would want to make, however, is that there are legal changes coming down the track on the back of the findings of the inquiry into the Manchester Arena appointment. It's known as Martin's Law, and these are coming down the trail later in the year. We're still waiting for some of the procedures coming through. So that is really going to change the whole game around that, just and raise the profile of it, not just in terms of health and safety requirements, which are obviously substantial in their own right. There are also going to be additional burdens placed on local authorities, schools in particular. Will have to revisit measures there, leisure venues, venues such as this. So there is a lot of work going on around that, and so again, I expect to see that start to feature and come through in this work over the coming period. Thanks, Chair.
Next year, Councillor Boyle, do you want to know?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Page 119, 3.11 mentions 81 recommendations. These may have been made published only to the departments concerned. Are they a collection that we can look at somehow?
Sorry, what was that? Are they a collection for?
Sorry?
Sorry, I didn't hear the end of the question.
Okay, are these published in a single place for the committee to see?
They will form part, so these recommendations have just gone through as in final reports that have been made. The majority of that 81, a lot of them are to do with building security, and they're very specific to the organisations that were visited. And so therefore the numbers are higher because each area had their own set of recommendations. They will, as it goes on, fall into these reports that we were talking about earlier. So you will get progress in what the recommendation is and what's been done about it, when it's implemented, if it's not implemented, when it will be. So that will feed in. These are, I think in the paper it mentioned that some of the most recent reports weren't yet added to the report that you've received today. So they will, that's what's going to happen now. Those reports will all be added in, and you will get details of those recommendations that remain outstanding.
Okay, thanks. On 3.13, the last sentence says it's imperative that remedial action is taken when these recommendations are national priority. So, from what you say, there is a remediation plan. Yes, right. That's right. Answers that one. And on tailgating, page 132, try and make this a question. The background to the question is that it's very difficult for a small person to turn into a big person and say, let's see your pension. It might be sensible to think of a way of maybe getting the person in front to sort of scared or shy, or asking the person behind on the bench to stand back and say, you go first, and then see what happens if you've got a badge and you get in, and that's fine. The question is, do you agree?
Let's do it.
I'm just saying it's accessible to the auditor. I suppose I should probably respond as an operational manager. It's multifaceted, really. I think there are elements, and we have been doing an educational programme for a number of years, which has included me standing at the door challenging people. The chief executive's been involved in that as well. Over a number of years, I think we're certainly getting better at it, and I think it is challenging because people are in a hurry and sometimes they get a wee bit irritable and annoying. So we need to continue to challenge that. We've obviously got a passage which do help. We need to encourage people to be vigilant. If you're not going to challenge, at least report it. And if you feel unsafe to challenge, at least report it, and then you can follow that up. But I think the other thing we need to look at is, and something that will happen to give us some thought to, is perhaps some sort of physical barrier that makes it a wee bit more difficult. So to give an example of that is perhaps would you install a turnstile type of thing that you see in other venues, and maybe that's something we need to think about as part of the remediation for the lands law, isn't it? So it's a physical turnstile type of thing that your badge lets you through, and then you don't have to do that channel, because if you don't have the badge, you can't get through the turnstile. So I think there's a collection of elements. I mean, I know this still has limited assurance in it. You know, this is the third report that's come to this committee. I personally have seen improvement from where it started. It wasn't good where it started, and I am reading through these reports. That there is more challenge and there's more vigilance, and so we just need to keep on top of that. So I think it's multifaceted, and I think at the end of the day, if a member of the staff is not feeling safe to challenge somebody, then they shouldn't do that with it. They should admit it. They should report it as quickly as possible can, and others to take action on it.
Great, thanks. Last one, page 133. Yes, it talks in the very last bottom corner, the weaknesses were found in 12 out of 12 sites visited and second bullet point 12 out of 12 sites visited. That would imply, with 100% fail rate, if you like, would suggest that the examination should be expanded then beyond try another 12 and see if you were just lucky to hit the 12 barriers in the first go. Because that suggests that this would be a saturation problem, but maybe not.
I guess to some extent, my reflection on that is that if you look at something, you're always going to find something to improve, and you probably should look at it in that way. I was kind of looking for the element, and I can't quite find it, but the first report, I can't remember how many facilities were visited, but it was 100% where someone, or at least 90-odd%, there was at least challenge in some of the instances in this one where, the challenge was there, the vigilance was there, or the internal auditor didn't get into where they were. I think from memory, it was 4 that we go through, the can't really see it here. So it certainly is an improvement. I think that I'll let Isabel answer for this. I think I'm not saying that internal audit will always find fault, but I think there's always room for improvement. I think it's internal audit duty bound to point that out. So I am seeing, for example, things that are relating to fencing and things like that might not necessarily appeared in the first one, which was more about people not being vigilant, leaving doors open, and that were allowing folks just to sort of breeze straight in, or not challenging. So Isabel, and I don't know if I've been unclear or not there, but I think to some extent, perhaps you can help me out on that one.
Sorry, the quality is really poor and I'm only getting snippets. But I think we're still talking about building security, are we? Yeah. So there is always room for improvement. That's the thing.
We were on page 133.
Right. So which one, on payroll or physical income? Physical income.
Yeah.
The sample. So the 12 buildings. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, yes, sorry, I'll just ask the question again. I was concerned when we're looking at physical income security arrangements, it's 100% fail rate in terms of finding or success rate finding weaknesses. And I wondered why you stopped that, suggested that this is a pandemic or a problem.
I'll answer a little bit first, and then I'll ask Sarah to come in about the specifics. If 12 to look at 12 is quite a big sample, but because of the fact that it was the physical income, it's not one that we've really done before, so it's probably not something again that's been on people's radar. As Stuart said earlier, with building security as such, although it's still sitting at limited, it has improved and there have been changes, and for every time we do it, there's some other area who's become more aware of their responsibilities around it. I think that's probably similar to this one with the physical income security. It's around making people aware of where they can improve. And again, those recommendations, there were quite a lot of recommendations. I think there was about 19 recommendations. And those were, again, because it was various different sites, they had very specific recommendations for them to make. So again, like we said earlier, if they were remaining outstanding as they get added on to the system, you will then hear about them, because if they're not being taken forward, they will come on that report. We would like to anticipate that things will obviously improve by putting the recommendations in place, which is probably a theme throughout this report. It's about making sure that all of these remedial actions are taken forward and in a timely manner to make sure that things are improving, and we are hopefully seeing less reports that are coming back as a limited assurance. But Sarah maybe can come in if there's anything specific on the 12 buildings and the weaknesses that were found.
Good morning. Yeah, the weaknesses of the 12 buildings, what you have to bear in mind, although it sounds terrible that it's 100% failure, not everything was found at every site. We've given an example at the bullet point 1, there's been restricted access to save, there's recording and checking of save contents. Some of the 12 locations did record their save contents, and some of the 12 locations didn't restrict the access to the save. So it wasn't 100% of the weaknesses we found was at all the properties. We're just trying to give an example that no one property was perfect, and there is room for improvement at every property that we visited. I suppose that's more what this 12 out of 12 part of it's really sort of demonstrating.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? And somebody to move the paper, please. Yeah, Councillor, that's on the second paper. Councillor Bolton. We're now open to debate. Would you like to debate the paper? You happy to know? Okay, we're on to the next item. This is item 10, and it's the corporate risk register. So the purpose provides the committee with the quarter 1 2023-24 update on Cockbansha County's corporate risk register appendix A, and the recommendation is that the committee look at the report, commenting and challenging as appropriate. So is again.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides the committee with an update on the corporate risk register. The summary appendix A indicates that the risk assessed has changed on this occasion. While most risks remain assessed and unchanged, the report illustrates the range of activity underway to mitigate or limit the impact of these risks materialising. So I'd be happy to take any questions, and I've also got colleagues in the room that should be able to help support me in that. Chair.
Any questions on that? No, okay. Would anyone like to move the paper? Okay, thank you, Councillor President, and Councillor Wilson to second the paper. Open to debate. Short. Nothing on the rest of okay, we'll move on to the next item. Oh, you have to take me. We'll move on to item 11 on the agenda, which is the People Directorate Business Plan Report 2022-23. The People Business Plan Report 2022-23 provides an annual update on progress against the actions, priorities and key performance indicators set out in the Cockbansha People Directorate Business Plan 2022-23, which was approved by the Audit and Scrutiny Committee in August 2022. It summarises the actions we've taken over the past year to address our improvement priorities and the impacts we're on to date. It also highlights any challenges that we've encountered. The detailed Quintana Progress Report Appendix 1 highlights the improvement activity undertaken across key performance indicators and the three main priorities: sustainable and inclusive growth, empowering families and communities in health and wellbeing. Key highlights are noted in this covering paper. It is recommended that the Audit and Scrutiny Committee note and provide challenge and comment on the context of this report. And I will hand over to Lady Sanders, supported by other managers. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to present the People Directorate Business Plan report. You may recall that at the 10th of August Council approved the business plan going forward for 23-24, and this report reports on the year prior to that. So the indicators and the targets that we set for 23-24 were approved by Council on the 10th of August. The People Business Plan report covers the services of children's social work, just as CLD, education, sports and leisure. As part of our ongoing transformation work, increasingly the services across the People Directorate are operating in an integrated way rather than standalone services, and I think you can recognise some of that within the report. And that's both to maximise resources and to avoid duplication, and to ensure that we can improve outcomes for our families and our communities and our individuals. The Family Wellbeing Partnership covers across all of these services and increasingly across all of the areas of the council business. And that's reflected in the report too. The effects of COVID and the cost of living do continue to affect our communities. Interestingly enough, I know we've had a bit of a discussion on that, but we are still seeing an impact on our individual families, communities, and our children in our schools and our young people and in our early learning centres. And we're having to work smarter to continue to improve our service delivery against reduced funding. The subsequent report to this one is the National Improvement Framework report, and it covers the same period. It goes into more depth to the education aspects of people performance, and Colin Bruce, the Chief Education Officer, will be happy to take questions on the education side of the performance, and we're supported by colleagues here who will be able to support Colin too. In relation to the other areas covered in this report, there are a number of areas of improvement highlighted in the covering report, which all improve, can contribute to that improving trend. And I'd highlight the continued improvement in children returning to Clackmannanshire who have had to go out of the area for care placements. Further, we've had a significant increase over the past few years, and we continue to see increasing since March this year in the number of children who are out of the area. And that's because we've increased the supports and we've done a lot of work within children's services. We also have an 85% reduction in unplanned care placements, so that's down to 1 in this period of report, from 7 in 2021 and 9 in 21-22. And we also have a reduction in children referred to the Children's Reporter by 20%. However, we're not complacent, and the previously agreed business plan that I mentioned sets out the ongoing actions that the Directorate is taking forward to continue to address areas such as the high levels of domestic abuse, youth employment and health and wellbeing. I'm happy to take any questions.
We have Councillor Borson. Yes, some questions. This is a reviewed report, and I think what's actually quite striking is all those green ticks there. I think that's saying a lot about the service and the effort that everybody puts in there. There are no reds, however, there are 3 ambers there, and I just wondered if we could maybe get a wee bit of an analysis around the 3 ambers. There's page 159, 161 and 177, particularly around the bit of care experience where we are committed to the promise, which is got paper and on that. So just a wee bit there. There's a wee bit of narrative in the box, but I don't think it really tells the full picture.
Thank you, Councillor Borson. So there's 2 in relation to attainment, which I'll ask Colin to pick up on, and the third one is on page, which says, looking over the care experience one. 177. Yes. 177. Yeah. So the work in terms of, so that is an area of service where we recognise that we do need to do more for our young people who are leaving care, and that age group of 16 to 25 is an area that we've tried to put an increased focus on. That means that so we have a lot of support with our young people at that area at the earlier stage. both within the schools and within the children's services area. But we do recognise that as they start to move out to live on their own, that we need an increasing level of support to help them. They often get into difficulty at that stage. So we would like to start to take forward more supported lodgings, and we've been working very closely with the Vardy Foundation to see whether we can invest in additional supported lodgings within Park Manager, so that we have a strength of support round about those young people that doesn't just drop off when they move into accommodation of their own, because it's often then when they start to realise that they don't have the resources and the resilience to be able to look after themselves. So we're starting to commission services, more services around about those young people, and the Vardy Foundation are also working very closely with us to think about how they could invest in both property and support in the area to help us with that group of young people. So that was identified as part of our own self-evaluation. We've also been working with the Aberlour Trust, and they've identified some areas where they think that we could improve. We're very receptive to that report that we got from Aberlour, and some of that is about hub models so that the young people themselves can come together. We already have the group of Our Class Voices who do come together and they're supported with the Children's Services team, but we need to strengthen that model and work more closely with our colleagues in housing and health and the independent employment as well. So that's the range of work. It's quite an extensive piece of work. I think that's why it's sitting at Amber. It's not complete in any way. We're probably at an earlier stage with that work than some of the others in promise. Thank you. Any other questions?
I can come in straight to that. I suppose when it comes to looking at care experience young people, looking at their attainment and their support, you immediately think, what are the teachers doing? And I think they're doing everything we can, absolutely going above and beyond, but we realise that actually it's a partnership approach that we have to make sure that we can support them to attend, young people to attend school, to remove any barriers they're experiencing regarding uniform, cost of school day, school meal day. Lots of important decisions made at this table have really influenced that support. But some of the partnerships that I would want to emphasise that we're committed to moving forward is Who Cares Scotland, a new partnership that are supporting our young people, our care experience in schools. NCR Pathways, we are committed to them again moving forward for the next 2 years, which is really offering mentoring support for these organisations and highlighting our commitment to that. And really excitingly, 2 virtual head teachers that we've got in post that we didn't have last year, targeting the support for the young people that we know aren't getting the same attainment outcomes in general. But I think that approach is we've not had in place and just started in the summer term there. So I'm hoping that I'm coming back to this table with improved outcomes and these not being amber and being green moving forward.
Yeah, you talked about barriers to children attending school. One of the barriers is bullying. I see in page 181 in PPO 2023, you're on about showing an increase from, you've seen that state of the building, has shown an increase from 69 in 2021 to 88 incidents across it. Now that may be because of the reporting mechanism, but the very fact that you have a minimum of 69 cases of bullying, what are we doing to tackle that in the school to make it more comfortable for young people to attend the school?
Yeah, I think your point here about the change in the systems of recording, far more rigor going into that, far more sort of effort to make sure that we are recording it and support our families. But that doesn't hide that these are all incidents that young people experience, and absolutely we can't accept that is okay. What we do find and what we're really clear on is that young people's health and well-being and returning from COVID, young people's health and well-being and related to the cost of living crisis, it all plays in. It doesn't just stand alone. the experience young people have, and sometimes that does play out in the schools. And what's important is that we've got approaches and committed to supporting staff, have approaches to make sure young people are ready to learn. So we're not, so our teachers are supported and our learning assistants and all staff are supported in trauma-informed approaches and readiness for learning, to know that young people will need to model the behaviours that we expect in the building, based when it's relevant, but absolutely speak to parents and get support when it's not being seen. So not hiding away from these stats that are there. I do think there's been a real culture shift in recording of it from before that was in place. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Out of the 51 tasks, very good, I mean, tremendous importance, generally speaking, but 4 of them had failed to reach even 80% education. And there's no education there, and on support for care experience young people, review of childcare, striving for compassion and youth justice. Those 4 are 70 or 75% complete. There's no indication in the report, I think, and I couldn't say this, as to when they will be completed. Or why they're running behind. Is it helpful to explore work as well?
Yeah, happy to do that. I think we've also got colleagues from Children's Services in the main. So do you want to just signal to me where they are? Can you do them individually? That's the best way. I mean, one of them I think we covered already, I think, in terms of the one that comes to the force. And so that work is ongoing in terms of, when I say that it's some of them, 75, will not just be completed at the end of the term of the report. It takes longer to put some of that work in place and to get everything in place. So I think we've been fairly honest in terms of, we could have said how much work did we expect to complete in this period, but the actual overall task has not been completed 100% in terms of that. It will run on and we expect them all to be completed absolutely. All 4 of us.
Then Councillor Hale, please.
Thanks, Chair. Colin, on page 199, it talks about qualifications. The last one's about S5 and scaling on. It talks about 52% to 2.4% of MCR and care experience. People staying on to S5. How does that figure compare to non-care experience people? And do you know what percentage of those who go to what is it going to do?
You have to get back to the actual facts about that, but just to give you sort of short narrative round about that. Our schools do everything they can from that stage to try and hold on and support our learners that care experience for as long as they can, and certainly not be thinking that someone just leaving because they choose, making sure that there's a positive pathway that is agreed and right for that young person, because we find that the longer these young people stay in school care experience or not, they need to back more qualifications and grow and just mature a bit more. But if it is the right thing for that person, if there's a positive pathway, that's when we would be okay with that. And there's also sort of quality assurance checks and making sure meetings around about that in place. So I'll get back to the actual specifics of their experience staying on versus those who don't. Okay.
Just ask, I know when you've gone by the class council and other saving together training, and I noticed with the high incidence of domestic abuse and the potential of risk of young children being removed under a domestic abuse situation. Is there something like saving together or something similar still ongoing to ensure that measures are put in place to support parents who are non-abusing parents to maintain that relationship with their children in that environment?
Yeah, please.
Yes, that's actually what I was working at. So as a part of the violence against women and girls strategic group for child and settlement with Marina and supporting, we have an education subgroup So within that education subgroup, we have police, women's aid, many people involved in that, and there's schools as well. So this year we are piloting Equally Safe at School, which is effectively an approach where we maintain all of these supports around the young people. This ties in very well with our relationship and sexual health and parenthood, the RHSP curriculum, which approaches a lot of these difficult areas as well. So it's very much on the education agenda.
And just to add to your additional point to that, so we've just recently redesigned children's services, and part of the focus of that redesign is on early intervention and prevention. So we've just recruited for the intensive family support team. So in terms of trying to keep families together, and some of the commission services that we've just recently commissioned, for example, the Aberdeen service, would all be in that territory of addressing some of the issues that might be borderline and where children might be in custody in some of those situations. So we've started to get upstream in some of those areas as opposed to just a reactive of waiting until the incidents actually happen. So I think there's quite a shift in this effort towards that early intervention and some of the education issues that are connected to mentioned. Does that answer your question?
It does to some extent, but I was just wondering about a lot of it as well was, I mean, the reason that the Safety Together model came about was because often there was this reaction to sort of blame the mum in a situation of domestic abuse because she stayed with the abusive partner, or I'm not being gender blameless, but whatever way around. And often that then put them in a situation of feeling real discomfort about coming forward for support. And I was just wondering if there was training in place for workers, even new workers, just to ensure that they look at the abused partner as a victim rather than like somebody that's not protecting their child.
Absolutely, and I think the focus of the Violence Against Women partnership is absolutely in that territory. If I could just bring in Gillian Scott, who's online actually, but she's got much more detailed information when you see her fingertips. Gillian.
Thanks, Lorraine. One of the challenges of not being in the room is not being able to jump up and down to say I've got something to contribute. So apologies for putting my hand up. It was just to highlight that the Safe and Together training is ongoing. We are continuing to roll that model out so that that's widely accessible and is a core part of the induction programme for all of our newly qualified social work staff who've recently been appointed, and also to highlight that as part of the work that's being rolled out in partnership with Justice, we have the non-court mandated Caledonian programme and support to the women alongside that, so that we're getting in at an earlier stage to support people where there is domestic abuse within their relationship, but that hasn't necessarily resulted in a conviction, so that support and to address those behaviours is available both for the perpetrator and for the women affected. I hope that helps.
Any other questions? No, can I ask for somebody to move the paper?
Yeah, I'm happy to move the paper. I think when there's a service that 60% of the council budgets is attributed to, the performance of that service is going to be really, really important to the overall organisation. And I think as we can see here, the performance against the business plan has probably been quite exceptional. And for me, I think that the reasons for that is the real joined up approach that you get between the service and all the different kind of strands of work. Lorraine has recently proposed a number of papers at the council meeting a couple of weeks ago, and she said in proposing the business plan for the coming year that the following papers were really integral to get to that, and that was around about around about tackling violence against women and girls, about tackling child poverty, raising attainment. Everything that was in there is at the heart of the service, and the service is performing so well against those objectives. I think says a lot for us. and probably says a lot to the supports that we're managing to provide for most vulnerable people in Clackmannshire. So I think the service has got a lot to celebrate, and I'm certainly looking forward to joining the celebration event. Is it the 7th of September? And maybe hearing a wee bit more about a lot of the work that's going on there, but absolutely delighted to propose this paper.
Entity second paper? Yep, okay. Thanks, Lenny. I'm happy to open the debate in terms of reading through this. I felt actually really encouraged to see a lot of the work that's going on in the early intervention and prevention. We've seen for years where, just as the point I raised in the question I raised, I was really, let's shout at that, let's shout, we're still doing these things like saving together and so on, because it's so important to ensure that families stay together wherever possible, because then we won't, even in a financial sense, we won't have the additional costs of children having to do with after. But the other intervention work taking place, I think it's inspirational. I'm really glad to see that. It's one of my main things that I took away from this. But in general, the kind of really high quality work that's going ahead, and I don't think there's an area that's not being tackled in terms of well-being for people. And you know, obviously, when the question was that one asked today, and that was answered. But you know, in general, seeing the domestic abuse strategy coming forward to council recently, seeing all the work that's being done and the early intervention, seeing the work. And the attainment challenge isn't something that's going to be tackled overnight. That's a long process. It's like the work that we put in now, the children and young people will see dividends in the future, but it's often the children who are in primary level who will see the real benefit when they come into high school level. So often we're looking for those quick returns, but I don't think that's always going to be necessarily there. And I think it's the patience to see that the work that's been done now will actually outturn in the future is really positive work. So I'm really encouraged to see this paper. I felt actually very encouraged to read it, and congratulations to the team on all of that. And also really pleased to see the virtual head teaching that actually be innovative. And I think that would be really good to see how that goes forward. Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to come in? Okay, Councillor Benny.
Yes, just quickly, it's 1 hour and I'm not going to. With this, you just have to look at the paper to see how much we are punching well above our weight in this. We've got the Vardy Foundation, we've got Aberdeen, we've got Sports Scotland coming in. It just goes on, and it's really great, and it's all plus from nursery right through to college. There's something there to help people who are struggling or whatever. The youth justice as well, and justice services are now helping youth justice to stop anything from happening before it does happen. So it's preventative as well as accumulative, and to me, I can't say enough for it. It's the people who are actually doing this are doing a sterling job. And again, not quite yet, but we'll never get perfect. I don't think we'll ever get perfect, but we can get very close to it, and I think we're getting there with that. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson, would you like to sum up? Nope. Nope. We all happy to accept the paper? Yep. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item 12 on the National Improvement Framework Report 2022-23. This report represents National Improvement Framework Report 2022-23 and is recommended that the committee will comment and challenge on the contents of this report. And that is presented by Phil Wonders.
Thank you, Chair. The National Improvement Framework reflects on the progress against our National Improvement Plan of 22-23 that was agreed last year. The report relates to the 5 priorities in the National Improvement Framework that are set out by the Government. These are placing the human rights and needs of every child and young person at the centre of education, improvements in young people's health and well-being, closing the attainment gap, improving sustained positive destinations, and finally, improvements in attainment with a focus on literacy and numeracy. There's no doubt the cost of living crisis, industrial action, straight away, and dare I say, COVID, they definitely impacted on some of the service delivery and some of the recovery from our young people over the last few years. And I think, just to be honest, you can see that in things like our attendance data, which is currently sitting at 90%. We want better than that, and we must really work together to improve that. But there are many highlights from attainment from this last year within the report. Many things I'm really proud of. The hard work of our staff, young people and their families, including improved numbers of young people achieving National 2 qualifications, which sometimes isn't shouted about, but at the same time, that's a lot of learners with additional support needs that absolutely hung in there and that gains qualifications. Pleasingly, when I look at the literacy and sum up all our data from P1 to P7 and add it all together, we're doing better than we have done over the last 2 years. And I can see that with currently 69.5% achieving a level versus 59, almost 10% more than that of 2019. I know numeracy is a hot topic across the board, but at the same time, we've seen improvements year on year for the last 3 years. We're currently 72% of our learners P1 to P4 are achieving a level compared to that of 68.9% 3 years ago. So our primaries are doing something right. When we look at attainment data in our secondary schools and some of the SBA information released, yes, the attainment isn't what it was maybe in the last year or the year before, but that is because our learners didn't sit exams and exams halls. So I think it's important to emphasise, I'm trying to compare what the young people were achieving this year compared to that of 2019 when they last, and when you compare it to that, my goodness, they've done really well and our staff should be proud. So here to discuss the paper, answer any questions, but also got colleagues that will have the detail behind that as well on hand. Thanks.
Questions? Anyone have any questions on the paper? Would somebody just move the paper? Is it possible?
Yeah. Yeah, I want to say a lot. I mean, I feel like I do have to say something on behalf of Councillor Lindsay, who's not here today, because I know this is an area that he's very, very close to. It's the regional improvement in the report, and I think it's important to kind of recognise this one of the areas of collaboration that we talked about earlier, and an area that's delivering results for us. There's lots of good things I think in here. Colleagues kind of said them, so I'm not going to repeat them. And I would just like to clarify, I completely understand the impact it is having on young people, and I don't think we can underestimate that whatsoever. I think we'll be dealing with the fallout of that for a long time to come. I think my comments earlier were more about kind of what we were doing, so please don't feel you need to caveat kind of making a bit around kind of COVID when I do say that. And in the context that we've been working in, our young people have performed exceptionally well, and I think that comes down to the dedication of our staff and the work that's gone in with our families over the last few years to really start pushing up those results. They're not where we want them to be. I think we can all acknowledge that, but we're moving in the right direction, and we just need to keep on, kind of moving. And when we do have a little setbacks, just reflect on, kind of what it is that we've maybe not done so well, and just pick it up and start moving. So I'm sure at the celebration event, the Civic will be talking about a lot of this stuff as well. So yeah, great report, and it's just good to see the progress being made in the service. Thanks.
And I'm happy to second the paper in terms of looking through it, looking at it really about what's been achieved. And I think that's something that's been asked for time and time again. Where's the evidence? And we're seeing in this the evidence of the work that was presented in the last paper and the ongoing work is showing that what we really are achieving for our children and young people. And I think that there's a huge amount of work within this report. I mean, when I was reading through it, I thought, this isn't just like words on a paper and it's a big report, it's actual work that's taking place, which is really quality for our young people. And again, I'll be really pleased to attend the event to see and hear more about it. So I'm very happy to second the paper. And now would you like to debate the paper? Happy to accept the paper. Right, so our final non-analytic survey, it's going to go like one paper left. Is that okay just to continue? Okay, so item 13, and Complaints Report 2022-23. So this report presents an overview of performance in relation to complaints handled during the year 2022-23, and it is recommended that the committee not comment on the challenging performance of council services in handling complaints. And this is who's going to present this paper.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. The annual complaints report is an overview of the performance of the council in relation to complaints made to us for the period of 1st April 2022 to 31st March 2023. As confirmed in the report, complaints provide a first-hand account of the customer's views and experience and can highlight any problems that the council may have otherwise missed. The council complaint procedure follows guidance produced by the Scottish Public Ombudsman, being a two-stage process as detailed in the report. In terms of the SPSO guidance, councils are required to publish an annual performance information against a number of indicators. I would draw the attention of councillors to Appendix 1 of the report. Indicator 1 shows the total number of complaints received is down from 2021-2022 by approximately 10%. Indicator 2 shows an increase in the closure of complaints at stage 1 within the set times on the increase compared to 2021-22 and the national figures. Although at stage 2 we have gone down in closure of cases both from the previous year and from the national figure. Indicator 3 also shows an increase in the average time taken to provide a full response to each stage of a complaint. And indicator 4 provides further detail on the average time delays in working days for a full response to complaints at each stage. Details of the complaints by service, subject matter, and those referred to the SPSO are also contained in Appendix 1. As elected members will be aware, work is well underway in the new customer service hub, which will include a complaints element, which should help improve and make it easier for a complainant as well as officers handling a complaint. Also, as part of the council's wider training programme for officers, myself and the P&P team will be looking to develop and roll out training on use of the hub and going over the council's complaints procedure. I'm also going to be attending the SPSO's annual conference in November to get some further guidance from the Ombudsman. Happy to take any questions.
It's probably not going to be yourself who can answer this one completely. It might be Pete, I think he's online. Obviously, the number of complaints there is quite stark that waste management is kind of got the most, the kind of highest level of complaints there. Do we have a reason for that, or are we kind of over reporting, or are we kind of doing anything that makes that higher? And what sorts of complaints are kind of coming through the service there, because it does seem quite a lot.
Yeah, there's a wide range of complaints, ranging from things like missed bins to complaints about bins that have been tagged because of contamination, and plus other things like fly tipping, or perhaps the bins haven't been put back in the right place by the operative. So there's a number of kinds of complaints. Really, just a bit of context. So the total for the year was 50 complaints. We actually empty something like about 13,500 bins a day. So in the course of a week, we have 52,165 interactions with the public. So, while any complaint, you want to avoid it, it just does kind of put it into the context that it's a relatively small number compared to the number of interactions that we have, I guess, is the point I'm making. Thanks.
Thank you. Just a quick question about, I can see that the bar waiting residents are kind of watching as well, as we're aware of the situation there, and a complaint that wasn't dealt with by the SPSO. Why was that not included here? Is that going to be included in a different report based on the timeline, or what's going on?
Thank you for the question. I wouldn't normally go into any individual complaints, but I'm aware that the Archway Residents Association has been in touch with a number of elected members. The reason why I wouldn't go into details, the actually SPSO decision on Archway one did not come through until May this year. So it will just be a statistic in the annual complaints report. I would not go into any detail in relation to that report, but I'm happy to have a conversation with you about it.
But just to confirm, then just say that will be the next year's report based on timeline. Nah, okay then, that's fair enough. Then will there be any further discussion on that? Because getting a complete upheld, I think a little bit more kind of scrutiny around it. Will there be a future time, or is that yet to be decided?
We have received a decision that the SPS over council has responded accordingly to that decision.
Can I just follow up on that one? It's obviously, it's not a situation where the council has, SPSO complaints upheld, on a regular basis. This is probably the first one for a while. Because if we're looking at the report for last year, there was, 12 complaints, 14 were determined by the SPSO, but none of the complaints were upheld, kind of last year before. So I think what Councillor Quinn was saying is because one has been upheld, will there be, I suppose, a bit more of a kind of a briefing for members on kind of the areas that it was upheld over, or will the kind of scrutiny committee have an opportunity to kind of delve into a wee bit more detail exactly what kind of happened within that complaint?
I'm more than happy to give the elected members a briefing on the actual SPSO decision. There's a lot of legal implications, so obviously I'd rather do that in private to the actual committee if that's possible.
Can I just follow up on that? We had a discussion about that and we decided if we brought individual issues to audit the scrutiny, we would have a lot of time on the agenda for those. So we felt it was more appropriate, and also for data protection, much more appropriate to have those discussions offline. Just for the protection of all involved, things can go into discussion that can be data protection without meetings. So I think it's really important that we stick to that boundary. There's somebody to move the paper, please. Okay, Councillor Benny, somebody second, Councillor L, over to debate. Councillor Forson.
Yeah, just to say, I mean, when you look at the overall picture there, the number of complaints from residents about services, it holds up well against the rest of Scotland. And sometimes I think we, particularly councillors, because we will never really get contacted when there's a complaint about something, we can sometimes think that there's probably more complaints out there than there actually is. I think the report kind of lays out that there isn't, and Pete's just put into context the complaints around about waste. When you look at the number of interactions and for example, number of bins, etc. 50 complaints over the course of a year really isn't that much. That being said, a complaint is one complaint too many as far as I'm concerned, so I think we always have to kind of strive to make sure that we kind of reduce the numbers there. But there's a saying that you can't please all people all the time, and I think that that's probably pretty true when it comes to council services. There always going to be someone who's going to be dissatisfied with the service that was received. But I think, kind of comparing the figures against the rest of Scotland, we're holding alone there and we're not doing too badly. So maybe not believing the kind of comments that are out there on Facebook posts, etc., social media is something that we all need to take into account. Thanks.
Anybody else want to come in? Do you have me to accept the report and the report? Thank you. Okay, so that concludes the business for today. I can conclude that the public part of the meeting is now finished and the recording will be stopped. So thank you for the attendance and the input.